every revolution, there's one man with a vision.
You can't handle the truth.
Hey everybody, this is Dave Hodges, host of the Common Sense Show, and we are the show that is freeing America one enslaved mind at a time. We have a terrific segment for you, and I do mean terrific segment. We're going to be talking with Scott Bennett about the appointment of Radcliffe, and I am so much behind this. I think it's the president's possible best appointment he's made since he's been in office. And we're also going to talk about fallout related to the Mueller report, and that might bring us back to Radcliffe again. Scott's been a guest on our show many times, but before we get started with Scott, I need to let you know who makes this show possible. We're brought to you in part by Noble Gold Investments, and I will tell you, this is not the time to keep a lot of cash in the bank. I'm telling people, from what I'm observing, a month, 2-3 months of expense money, and you need to diversify, because I do think the banks are in jeopardy. I'm not saying they're going to crash tomorrow, but I do think they're in jeopardy, and I'm going to help you stay out of the way. Give Noble Gold a call, and they'll tell you if they can help you. Make sure you tell them I told you to call, and that number is 877-646-5347. That's 877-646-5347. And we're also brought to you by the best storable food company out there too, preparewithdave.com. You know you need at least 6 months. FEMA and DHS have been beating that drum as well. If they say 6 months, you probably need a year or longer. And they're offering 40% off now. And to play catch up, I know it's not easy. So we're offering the packages in 2 and 4 week increments at 40% off. Restaurant quality, 25-year shelf life. It's the best deal out there right now. Go to preparewithdave.com. Those are the two sponsors that are bringing us the first segment of this interview with Scott Bennett. Scott, I want to welcome you to the show, and we're always picking up new listeners, so there might be a few people out there who aren't familiar with your background. So could you give them just a brief synopsis? Because I think in particular, your intelligence advising background is really important to this interview we're going to do.
Well, people can, and first of all, it's an honor to be with you, Dave. I always enjoy our conversations.
Thank you.
And people, if they're interested, they can find me at the website www.shellgamewhistleblower.com. Shellgamewhistleblower.com. Shell Game was the name of the military whistleblowing report to Congress that I wrote when I was an Army officer. Working in psychological warfare, State Department, counterterrorism, terrorist financing operations at U.S. Central Command, State Department, CENTCOM, Central Command, and I had a top secret SCI clearance. And I was also a defense contractor with Booz Allen Hamilton alongside Edward Snowden. And I was at U.S. Central Command tracking down all the terrorist financing money that the Clinton Foundation and the Department of Justice under Eric Holder and Lenny Brewer were laundering for Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates in places like Libya and Syria and elsewhere. So when I found that out and I started making reports and doing briefings and really trying to dig this up, the deep state didn't like it, and they threw me in jail for allegedly making a false statement on a housing form by circling the wrong bubble. And little did I know that was God directly intervening, because if I had not been thrown in jail by them, and actually I was supposed to go to California, and the White Hats, under God's tutelage, redirected me to Pennsylvania. If I had not been thrown in jail by the Obama administration and yet redirected by some unseen forces, I would never have ran into the Swiss bank whistleblower himself, Brad Birkenfeld, who was the very figure I had been looking for in this missing chain of terrorist financing. So Brad Birkenfeld and I met in prison, and we went through all of his WikiLeaks cables and his Swiss bank documentation. and the cables from Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State, and all of these things were on her emails that she destroyed, but we saw them firsthand, and it was a startling revelation. And the report shell game went up to members of Congress, went up to the military, went to the Washington Post, went to Fox News, went to numerous media people, and it was covered up. The CIA came against me. Everyone is desperate to keep this buried, but we have not kept it buried. We've given it to President Trump. We've given it to key members of Congress. And now, because of the recent falling apart of the Mueller report and the Russia hoax, which incidentally all started at the same time we filed our original report, Shell Game, in 2012. With the fall of all of this, now we're seeing the president go on the attack. So that's kind of a fast introduction of my background, but people can go to shellgamewhistleblower.com, and the report Shell Game is up there that they can see.
Okay, I mean, I appreciate the background here, because people need to know that you are more than qualified to be commenting on what we're going to talk about. Well, here we have Barr in place as the AG, and I think if he has the right forces behind him and around him, I think he's capable of doing the job that Sessions did not. But here comes a guy who I think is going to assist in all that. I think Ratcliffe is a man who takes no prisoners. I see him as someone who is fearless. I mean, he's the first, and I saw this in a tweet that I published, that he said there's a secret society, quote unquote, that is trying to unseat Donald Trump. He jumped out ahead of this before anybody over a year ago. Actually, it's more than a year and a half ago. And so I see him as being a great ally to this president, and I see him really as being able to facilitate, shall we say, information gathering related to things like the Epstein case. How do you see Ratcliffe?
Well, I would agree with you. I think Ratcliffe, in his demonstration at the Mueller hearing, was exceptional. I think, all of the people who were attacking Mueller's credibility and his ridiculous, statements and claims and obfuscations and attempts to escape, his distractions, Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz and Devin Nunes and Ratcliffe himself, they were doing masterful work in exposing the incompetency of Mueller, the perhaps borderline senility of Mueller, complemented, of course, with perhaps an alcoholism of Mueller. Besides the puppeteering of Mueller is the kabuki theater, with Wiseman actually pulling the strings and most likely writing the report. And now you opened up another door with Weissman. You go deep into the bowels, or I should say colon, of the deep state. And you're seeing Jenny Rhee and all of these anti-Trump prosecutors brought on this feeble old man's team that resembles the father of Homer Simpson. He can't remember his name. So, I've said before, we've had 8 years of Obama as our constipation, backing us up with all sorts of toxicity and poisons. And Trump is our enema. Trump is going up and flooding and cleansing our whole body politic. And I think Ratcliffe is the instrument to do that. So his appointment as the director of national intelligence is brilliant, because it fits in line with a suggestion we've been making for over a year, which is Donald Trump needs to appoint a cabinet level position, which is the Inspector General Czar. And that would be a person at the White House that reports directly to the president, almost like a chief of staff, that says, Mr. President, here is what all of the inspector generals at all of your agencies, specifically the intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies, are doing, are investigating, and are working with the Department of Justice on. That's what Trump needs, is someone who can drive the inspector generals in these agencies like a sled driver driving huskies. And I mean cracking the whip and whipping their butts and moving them like they've never been moved. And that's a key position, because all of this corruption and abuse and the systematic governmental camouflaging of a coup d'etat. This was a coup d'etat which was camouflaged as official government business. It had nothing to do with America's Constitution or America's business, or certainly not the people's business. It was a psychological operation and a propaganda attempt to try and overthrow a president, delegitimize the votes of the people of the United States, and reinsert this totalitarian, fascist, Democrat, leftist group and agenda, which they had started under Obama and were hoping to continue with the Wicked Witch of the East, Hillary Clinton. Of course, God intervened and stopped it. But that's what all of this was about. And Ratcliffe has now been appointed as in a position as Director of National Intelligence. And I know this because I worked with the Director of National Intelligence when I was at the State Department. And it is a brilliant position because it is exactly what I just described. It is the Inspector General czar for every intelligence agency, every intelligence person, every intelligence document, every intelligence email on the SIPR and NIPR and TSSCI communication channels. Those are the 3 different communication channels that the government uses. So now Ratcliffe is basically the captain of the ship, or I should say the operator that can look in and plug in all the phone lines, and he can go to the CIA, he can go to the State Department, he can go to the Defense Intelligence Agency, he can go to FBI and DOJ and say, I want to know everybody who's been working on these intelligence matters. I want them all in a room, and I'm going to assign a lieutenant to handle the interrogation of everybody at CIA, another lieutenant to handle the interrogation of everybody at FBI, another lieutenant to handle everybody at Treasury or elsewhere. So Ratcliffe is in the great position to have a staff of people. If he, I'd suggest he do it himself because he's got the guts. He needs to go into all these agencies and overthrow the money changer tables, dump the bookshelves down, go through everybody's desks, start to draw the schematic like Spygate did a great job, and connect all the dots, create the constellations, and it will lead you back to what we reported in 2012. It'll take you right back to Obama. The start of the Yellow Brick Road is this: Obama, Hillary Clinton, Eric Holder, Lanny Brewer, their political appointees that were in 2009 that then transitioned into GS level positions, government service positions. So appointees of Obama were then made government service employees, which are bureaucrats. And when they were in those positions as bureaucrats, that's when they were handcuffed to the levers of power, because they have GS level jobs. You can never fire them, goes the rumor or the fantasy, which is totally untrue. You can fire them. So that's where all of this can lead, is right back to the Obama administration, Hillary Clinton, Eric Holder, Lanny Brewer, their contractors. It'll go right to the British too, GCHQ, and it's already going that way. And then Ratcliffe can work simultaneously with Barr on prosecuting any abuses of power, abuses of government systems, Title 22 actions, doing something illegally or unconstitutional under color of law. He can also say misprision of felony. Any government personnel that knew of felonious activity and didn't report it, or aiding and abetting a crime. So now, as Ken Starr just said, now is when the full revelation of truth is coming. Now is when we go back to Genesis 1, chapter 1, to see how all of this started. And I'll just give them a quick aggregation. This Genesis 1, chapter 1 started really in 2009 when Hillary Clinton came in as Secretary of State, and the first action she did was to imprison American Swiss banker Brad Birkenfeld after he had been targeted by the CIA and Edward Snowden, and threw Birkenfeld in jail, confiscated billions of dollars in Swiss bank accounts, specifically 15,000 bank accounts, and hid those, confiscated those, extorted those, and made deals with the Saudis, the Qataris, the United Arab Emirates to fund the Clinton Foundation as a cover for State Department licensing of weapons, to advance the Obama agenda of the Arab Spring, overthrowing Syria, overthrowing Libya, overthrowing Ukraine. All of that started in 2009 with Brad Birkenfeld. And then it came to light when he met Scott Bennett, a military terrorist financing guy who did this for a living. We connected the dots, we made the puzzle complete, and then we filed it to Dianne Feinstein, members of the House and Senate Intelligence Committee, Foreign Services Committee, Military Armed Services Committee. We sent it to James Mattis. We sent it to General Michael Flynn. We sent it to Trump himself. We sent it to Michael Cohen, his lawyer. And all of these people came after to try and do damage control. That's part of why they invented the Russia hoax, because I was on the Russian television in 2015, and immediately after that, Putin went right into Syria. Why? One of the big revelations was shell game. So I think they were desperate to try and shut down Russia. They were trying to invent this Russia hoax. They did that with Podesta and the book Shattered. But this had been coming along for a long time. And then all of this is sort of climaxing with Mueller and these people going after people like James and Joanne Moriarty, who I know, and we talked about this, going after Michael Cohen, the president's attorney, and turning on him, going after Michael Flynn because he knew about this. And all of it is just now in the last couple months, and really last week after the Mueller hearing, that was the last breath of the Mueller probe, and it is now dead. Dirt is being cast on the face of the Mueller probe, and now Ratcliffe and all the others are sharpening their bayonets, locking and loaded, and ready to run like screaming rebel yell Scottish Highlanders with a blood vengeance at all of these demoniac leftist lunatic Democrats that invented this crime of the century. And I think it's going to result in the most decimating political, I should say, decimating political slaughter. I was looking for that word advisedly. It will create the most decimating political slaughter of Democrats in the history of American elections in 2020, because all of this is going to come out like an avalanche of Niagara Fall proportions and wash all of these traitors and these liars and the media with them down the drain. And I think we could be on the resurgence of an American Renaissance like never before. It's a Reagan Rooseveltian sort of opportunity. And I think with Trump now free to make positive foreign relations with Russia, with North Korea and Iran, I think you'll see him blossom as a man in a way that he couldn't do it before. Part of his blossoming, of course, has to cut away the restraints of people like John Bolton and Pompeo and other people that are problematic, and appoint new people. Appoint people like Senator Dick Black, who's been over to Syria, been over to Iran, been over to Russia, and he's favored very highly. And also perhaps appoint Tulsi Gabbard, because I don't think she's going to get the Democratic nomination, which I'm glad for, because she's the only real threat to Donald Trump, because she's the candidate of peace in the Middle East. But if she doesn't get the nomination, Trump needs to bring her into his cabinet, because she will be a very strong draw for the voices of peace and the moderate Democrats. She's one of the last old-fashioned moderate Democrats, because she was raised by conservative Republican family. So all of this is just to say Trump is on the pivot point, and now he's got the sun at his back, and he's looking down from the high ground, and now he's just unsheathing his sword, just going, follow me in a battle, and this will be the greatest victory for American conservatism that we've seen in this century.
Let me give you the Hodges hypothesis here, because it falls in line with a lot of what you're saying, and I want you to pick this apart as you see fit. I don't think with Epstein, and now that we've got a trusted person in the DNI position, I don't think we're going to see a data dump. I don't think we're going to see major people go to prison. I think quietly behind back doors, we're going to see leverage obtained with this data, so Trump can get done what he needs to get done. What do you think?
Well, I think that's a wise way to do it. I mean, he has to consider the emotional fragility of the American public. And remember, the independents always determine elections, so he cannot lose the independents. He has to keep them in his column to win. All the elections are very close. It's always, 47% to, 51 or 2, whatever it is. So these are always, it's not going to be a 25% to, 70% kind of thing. It's going to be close as always. So he's got to keep the independents in his column. And to do that, he can't seem like he is, just on the blood rampage for vengeance or sacrificing the Constitution or things like that. I don't think he'll do that, but he's got to make deals and work back channels. He's got to turn people who have more value, turning others in, like Epstein, for example. Epstein, you may not die in prison, but you may get 10 years, but it's your choice, 10 years or 45 years. And or you may even be killed in prison because what you did to some of these little girls. So if he turns him and says, okay, 5 or 10 years, and in exchange, we want everything you've got on American, politicians and everyone who are participating in these crimes, all foreign people, foreign leaders that were participating in these crimes, what agencies were involved, whether it was a Israeli Mossad honey trap. These are intelligence opportunities for Trump to gather intelligence on who are the operatives working in the Epstein operations, and also could conveniently persuade people, look, you either leave government, you leave your area, you completely just disappear, or we're gonna bring an indictment for you for aiding and abetting and conspiring and collaborating with Epstein in this whole operation. So the Epstein thing really is how to prosecute foreign intelligence people using child pedophilia rather than simply dusting off an old case. And I'll say this too. There's been deep state problems riddled throughout Trump's presidency, and one of the deep state problems is Rene Alexander Acosta, who handled the Epstein case originally. But here's the other thing that he did, Dave. Rene Alexander Acosta prosecuted Brad Birkenfeld in the Swiss bank UBS case in 2009. It was 2009.
That's incredible to me.
That was Acosta.
Oh my! Because here's where I think Trump is vulnerable, and I'm not saying he did anything wrong. In fact, I think the opposite. But he appoints Acosta to become the labor secretary after Epstein got a country club jailhouse deal. Yeah. And it makes Trump look in some ways like he's somehow compromised. Now, my hunch is he was following the advice of people in his administration. This guy would be a good appointee. Yes. Okay. And I think it's probably an appointment of negligence more than it is complicity. But Acosta does give kind of an Achilles heel approach to Trump in the Epstein situation, I think.
Well, yeah. I mean, Trump's, for as good as Trump is in many ways, he has suffered the victimization of bad decisions and relying on people that are bad and relying on the recommendations of bad beta males, who are parasites in the political world. I was in the Bush administration, and I can't tell you, there's very, very few strong alpha male type of personality leaders that are really in it to serve the country, to advance an agenda of conservatism, to revive the Christian moral spirit in America and family values, all of the things that have been corroded by Hollywood culture and the Democrat atheism and godlessness and humanism. Very few people go in to really fight that. I did, but many others, the vast majority, are these beta male Republicans who just want to pad their own nest, want to get a credential, and want to move on to another job. And it's sickening because they're occupying positions that real good diehard people could occupy. And Trump sort of fell into that by some of his appointments that have worked against him. Dan Coates, I think, was a miserable failure. Jeff Sessions, I think, was a failure too. But Coates was really bad because he opposed the president's foreign policy attempt to negotiate, more positive relations with Russia, which got him elected. Americans elected Trump because they wanted positive relations with Russia. They like to hear Trump resonate with these slogans and claims and promises of pulling us out of the Middle East, making friends with Russia. Americans knew there was a major miscalibration that was done in the 90s that was never set properly, and the 9/11 events made it even worse. And Americans voted for Trump to reset all of that stuff. Now he's in a position to do that. But again, Rene Alexander Acosta was the deep state prosecutor involved with Epstein, involved with the Hillary Clinton, Eric Holder, Covington and Burling Swiss bank scandal. And Acosta should be told, look, you need to describe everything you know about this Swiss bank prosecution. I don't care if Trump is Swiss banks. That's not the issue. It's about Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and Covington and Burling and Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer intentionally with Loretta Lynch hiding all of this intelligence from the military and using the money from these operations to do illegal, unconstitutional overthrows of foreign governments. That's what this was all done. And Acosta was part of that conspiracy. So the Epstein thing is, one side of his coffin, and the UBS thing is the other side of his coffin. So the only way Acosta is going to escape is if he turns over everything to Trump and these new prosecutors. And that's the only way he'll save his own skin.
Scott, I knew Acosta was dirty, but I didn't know he was this dirty. And you have set me back on my tail, and I need to step aside just for a second here to let people know the second part of the show is brought to you by Noble Gold Investments. People, they're there helping you with no pressure avoid the train wreck that's coming economically. Give them a call at 877-646-5347. And again, that storable food is still out there, 40% off, and you don't know how long that sale is going to be in place by the manufacturer. You want to go to preparewithdave.com to take advantage of this. We're talking with Scott Bennett, and we just had an amazing revelation. I've written about Acosta. I don't like Acosta, and I've exposed Acosta, but not like he just got exposed right here by Scott. I'm still panting at what you just said about this guy. I didn't know that he was involved with Birkenfeld. I had no clue.
Yeah.
I will tell you this, though. Some of the trail you're talking about has a parallel path with HSBC Bank and the money laundering that went on there. And I know this because I've interviewed John Cruz, who was a former senior VP, and Loretta Lynch whitewashed everything he gathered for evidence and gave HSBC a slap on the wrist, and people walked, and Loretta Lynch walked that into the attorney general position, and Comey was on the board of directors at HSBC when this was all going down. And so there's a parallel path there too that matches what you're saying.
Yeah. And Epstein's connection with Deutsche Bank, all of these banks, and I think UBS is going to come out on that too. The Hollywood elite, everybody who had money or was doing secret, sinister things, had a UBS, Union Bank of Switzerland account. So that was really the heart of a lot of the financial shenanigans that Acosta was part of, was burying and hiding a lot of the elite money in bribes, in extortion, in paybacks. And Hillary Clinton was the chief criminal among that. She said, okay, give me 15,000 bank accounts, and I'm going to put this on my server so the Chinese can, get access to it. I'm going to make sure the Swiss take Chinese Uyghurs back from Guantanamo Bay, so they hold them. So China is going to be happy about that. I'm also going to make sure that Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates are going to use the money that we confiscate from the Swiss banks to give to the Clinton Foundation in exchange for weapons that they're then going to use to invade and overthrow Libya. Isn't this nice? Isn't this the perfect mousetrap? This is how this is all going to work, and we're going to dominate and be queen of the world, and then I'll be president in 8 more years, and we'll destroy every white male. We'll destroy every remnants of Christianity. We'll destroy every male-female relationship, and we'll call everybody androgynous and transgender, transvestite, whatever. We'll have males running in female track races and vice versa. We won't have a sexual society anymore. We'll just have hell on earth. That really was at the root of the heart of Hillary Clinton, and people knew that.
I got to ask you this question here, because you're touching on this on the periphery when you mentioned Libya. Why was Ambassador Stevens assassinated? And that was an assassination.
Well, he was assassinated because he knew about the 50,000 shoulder-fired missiles that had been smuggled up to Turkey to be used in the Syria overthrow operations, which Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the United States CIA and Mossad had been planning. And it had been precipitated by the Arab Spring, which had been also planned and executed by the Rand Corporation and the Soros organization. I know it because I was there. I remember seeing the Soros name on all the documents and the paperwork, and it was, you know, camouflaged as bringing democracy and enlightenment to the Middle East, but in fact it was trying to usher in the Muslim Brotherhood, you know, takeover of places like Egypt, and that was what Saudi Arabia wanted because they are seen as the chief Wahhabist, Salafist extremists of terrorism, and that makes them a perfect beehive. They're like the killer bees, right? You've got honeybees, Muslims, like I'd say the Shia and the Alawite and the Iranians and stuff. And then you have the killer bees that are crazy and that will sting anything and chase you down. That's the Wahhabis. And that's why the lunatics like Hillary Clinton and Obama and such like to use them for these sort of operations because they were just dripping with blood and violence and rape and beheading boys and things like that. Russia knew that. Syria knew that. That's why Senator Dick Black went over to Syria. That's why, incidentally, Dave, that Andrew McCabe tried to overthrow Dick Black and have Andrew McCabe's wife take over Dick Black's Senate position.
I remember that.
And that's another revelation that's coming out is Andrew McCabe trying to get Dick Black either killed or caught or harmed by trying to send him over to Syria to negotiate with some terrorist plan. And Senator Black said, I'm not going over and talking to terrorists. And that was a McCabe, Clinton, Terry McAuliffe attempt to probably bump off Senator Black and then slip in Andrew McCabe's wife. And again, all of this is there. All of it's documented. None of it's made up. And it can be verified by people like Ratcliffe, Barr, perhaps a new inspector general that's better than Horowitz. I want some bloodhounds in these legal investigatory agencies to really go on the hunt, not to sniff around and wag their tail, but I mean to go on the hair on the back, standing up, growling hunt for these rats that have burrowed into our government and have tried to overthrow the Constitution, overthrow the president, started these endless wars, destroyed the treasury and the reputation of the United States, and put us in a very problematic position. Now, I think Trump is going to hopefully reverse a lot of that, but he's got a lot of people that are problematic still, like Bolton, who's never served in the military, and he's the first one to say we should invade Iran, we should go to fight with Iran, and this and that. Iran is not the problem. The problem is in Iraq. Sistani is the Shia leader in Iraq that is fomenting a lot of the Shia unrest against Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and being the ideological wind in their sails. So it's not even Iran, and that's where Trump has made a major miscalculation. And Iran and Iraq now, because of the U.S. Perception of being a bully, a tyrant, and waging war on everybody, they're closer now than ever before. So in a sense, Trump's got a lot of complex things that he can't necessarily do by himself. He has to enlist the help of, Putin and Russia, because they're perceived as a very morally superior, trustworthy ambassadorial presence in the Middle East. Whether you like it or not, they're just liked by Turkey. They're liked by Syria. They're liked by both Saudi Arabia and Yemen and Iraq and Iran. We're not. So it makes perfect sense to go, okay, we need the Russians and Putin to come in, work with the United States to say, Yemen and Saudi Arabia, stop your fighting. Turkey, you need to be a Switzerland. Iran and Iraq, essentially, you need to make a peace accord with Israel. And Israel, incidentally, Trump has given the Golan Heights and the Tel Aviv, Jerusalem embassy transferred to Jerusalem.
Right.
Now he's basically sidelined Netanyahu and the Israeli Likud party to say, I've given you everything I'm giving you. You stand over in the corner. Now I'm going to have a conversation with Iran, and you're not part of it. I've given you everything. We're going to settle this matter on our own. We're going to do waivers. We're going to do new JCPOA, whatever it is. We're not going to go into war because it would be the end of Trump. I think he knows that. Tucker Carlson has said that too. And I met Tucker and briefed him and gave him a copy of my book. I think Trump is now going to do another pivot. He's going to kind of do a flanking maneuver. Half of his forces are going to go on the attack of the deep state and the domestic terrorism that's been going on in the political agencies of the Department of Justice, of the FBI, of the CIA. And the other part of him is going to focus on the foreign policy by uniting America with the former Soviet country, Eastern Bloc countries of Russia, uniting with Russia, and using Russia to pacify Iran and use that as a bulwark or counterbalance against China's imperial ambitions, which are far more dangerous. China is really the greater existential threat to the United States over the next 100 years.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so correct. Yeah, I want to backtrack to a man you brought up who I think we both agree was the driving force behind the Mueller report, and that's Weissman. And I just want to get your take on him. And let me tell you my first dealing with him. I had dealing with this guy. He helped bring down Enron. And I can tell you, I was there firsthand doing a deal with Vance Davis, formerly of the NSA, and Bill Pollock, ex-Air Force intelligence. And we were doing a deal with Ken Lay and Enron involving technology when Weissman and his thugs swooped in and fabricated charges against him. Now, I don't know if he was innocent of everything, but I know he was innocent of some things because I knew what he was involved in. And Weissman is just one bad dude. What's his origin? Is he CIA? I mean, what is he?
Well, I think he's obviously a very leftist, pro-Hillary Clinton Democrat ideologue. He went to Hillary Clinton's election party. I haven't done an exhaustive professional history of him, but I would say he's of that ilk of really most of these leftists are really communists in their heart. Yes. Communists and fascists and authoritarians. Weissman is the perfect authoritarian. He is this little pipsqueak leftist, Jewish attorney. So he's got this anti-Christian, Kalergi plan worldview. He has no desire to live, in the Christian America. He's obsessed with overthrowing it. And he does that through open borders and flooding the world with illegal immigrants, because that's how you overthrow the United States. So that's the heart of Weissman, is this fascistic authoritarianism using law in courts to do that. And he's done that, of course, as you said, in the Enron situation, or I think Anderson Consulting as well. He was party to that, and that was thrown out later. But not until after the company was dissolved, and Weissman going down and throwing down the gauntlet, threatening people, putting people in solitary confinement. I think Weissman, and again, I don't have any patience or tolerance or sympathy for Mueller, because everything that was done under him. Mueller was essentially Eisenhower, if you will, of this whole fantasy operation. Weissman was a lower, officer pulling the strings, but Mueller allowed Weissman to send people over to Manafort's house and kick down the door in the middle of the, early morning, and his wife's in the shower, to go into Roger Stone's house with guns drawn by the FBI, tipping off CNN, which I'd say is a crime. That was all Weissman. And so Weissman, by Ratcliffe, needs to be fully examined and exploited. The other good thing about Ratcliffe is he can work hand in hand with his colleagues in the House and the Senate to say, here's what we're doing. The White House administration and myself are doing this. We're looking at these people. We need you to look at them. We need you to examine them, because if they lie to you, then you refer it for a criminal prosecution. We're going to get criminal prosecutors in the Department of Justice that will not let Comey go or others, but are actually going to prosecute these people for crime. So I could see Weissman being prosecuted, being fired, being suspended, being disbarred for all of his shenanigans. They thought they were going to emotionally destroy the president and emotionally destroy the American people through a warfare of siege, if you will, of constant psychological harassment. And they didn't calculate it properly, because the American public believed in Donald Trump. They liked Donald Trump. His domestic successes were keeping them fueled. They knew instinctively there was nothing there. The American people don't fear Russia. They don't think the communists have come back to power or are going to invade New York, Alaska, or Florida. So the American people were going, there's nothing there. And they don't like the mainstream media. They don't like Anderson Cooper of CNN or MSNBC or Rachel Maddow or these shrill, angry voices. They don't like Ocasio-Cortez or Ilhan Omar or the other Skigsian witches who have been so violently, misogynist, or I should say, man-hating, environmental fascists and racists and bigots. The American people are pulling away from the Democrats because of all of that, as well as Kavanaugh, the deplorable behavior that they emanated in Kavanaugh. So the Democrats are having a major identity crisis because of the things that they've done unto themselves. And Weissman, I think, and all these other, Mueller, Weissman, Jenny Rhee, all of these people, Strzok, Page, Steele, the British who were involved with this, the British GCHQ and the entrapment of Papadopoulos, they're all going to be put on the spotlight. And they never encountered that. They never thought that was going to happen, the bad guys. But it's going to happen. They're going to be under the spotlight, and they're going to break, they're going to crack, they're going to squirm, they're going to squeal, and like the demons looking for pigs to jump into. They're going to tear their clothes off and just go mad, striking mad. I think we're on the verge of watching the whole Democrat Party and these deep staters fall into an absolute fetus position of their inability to cope with this. You may see false flag civil war triggers to try and be distraction operations because it's that close. We're that close to the fire and putting these people away. And I think Trump's not going to relent. He's going to drive this. He's going to ring this bell up right to the election day of 2020 and say, this is a threat to the United States of America. If you don't vote for me, these people are going to overthrow this country and turn us into a communist country and flood it with illegal immigrants, and it will be the USSR all over again. And I think he will also get, interestingly, opportunities for Russia and Putin to give advice, if you will, or to demonstrate what we saw happening to the United States with this Russia probe. Demonstrates the same thing that happened to us in 1917 or whenever the Red Revolution was. And it was a bloody murder of the Tsar and his family and the overthrow of Christian Russia. It's on the verge of happening in America.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I've called what's going on with the Democrats the Bolshevik Revolution for just the reasons you cited. There is one area, though, where I think the president is extremely vulnerable, and I'm going to defer to the research of Dr. Epstein, not Jeffrey, but Dr. Epstein, former editor-in-chief of Psychology Today, and he did an analysis, a statistical analysis of the algorithms at Google. And he said they have the ability to change 15 million votes. And when you combine that with the illegal aliens that'll be voting illegally in places like New York and California, and all the voter fraud with George Soros voting machines, I don't think the 2020 election's a done deal. And I worry that the president is actually sacrificing a big voting bloc by not dealing with media censorship.
Yeah,
especially from big tech.
I think you're right. I think the lawsuits that Tulsi Gabbard and many other conservatives, including myself, are going to be filing against YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Google, because of their manipulation of conservative voices, as well as their totalitarian, authoritarian actions against, for example, Tulsi Gabbard. That's the great threat to America. The personalities behind these tech companies are some of the most antisocial, God-hating humanists you will ever come across, dripping with arrogance and passive-aggressive violence that you've never beheld or seen. And you see that coming up when they fire people or yell at people, and they go crazy mad when conservative viewpoints are advanced. We can't survive as a society if we allow that 1984 control of information to be controlled by CIA owned and controlled tech companies like this. And there's a lot of talk about CIA having deep roots and YouTube and Facebook and such. So Trump has to go after them with a Federal Communication Commission, which he's done. We've recommended that, and he's actually doing it. Federal Communication Commission, Inspector Generals, and perhaps do a complete monopoly breakdown of Silicon Valley, an antitrust investigation and breakdown to break up these companies or give them extreme oversight, and in some case prosecute them for civil rights violations under 18 U.S.C. 242 or 42 U.S.C. 1983, 84, and 85. They are doing things that are violating the civil rights of American citizens, and the government can bring cases against that. Because if the Silicon Valley companies begin to implode or lose their stock value, in a sense, it's a good thing for America, because those companies in California are driving the California communist takeover of California. New California is a response to that, but Trump needs to go on the full attack, because these tech companies are a very dangerous threat to freedom of speech, manipulating the vote. Trump's right when he says we need to go to paper votes, paper ballots. He's exactly right, and I think he is probably going to invest that, because we cannot have a republic. We're not a democracy. We're a republic. We cannot have our republic endure when we trust electronic algorithms or the companies or the contractors that promise us they are doing the job. They are, calculating things honestly and accurately. After this whole shenanigan of 2.5 years, and from what I've seen personally, and the cowardice and the cover-up and the corruption and the treason that was done by people in the military, people in the intelligence community, people in the Senate and the House, I saw it up close and personal, and I will testify till my dying day until some of these people are executed for treason, because kids in uniform are dead or crippled because what Hillary Clinton and Obama and Eric Holder did, and people at Covington and Burling did. We cannot long survive as a republic when we allow this tyranny. And perhaps a civil war is the best thing that could happen to America, because we have to have a political mitosis and cut away the gangrene and the insanity and the corruption which is infecting our bloodstream body politic, like Antifa. That criminalization of Antifa as terrorists need to happen. And we also have to have a Second Amendment executive order that recognizes the American citizen has the right to keep and bear arms. That means that every state, every concealed carry permit has reciprocity with every other state in the union. And every American citizen, if they choose to walk down the street with a gun on their hip, they can do it without asking permission, because their permission is guaranteed under the Second Amendment to protect their body, their property, and their family. That is the way to instantly drop crime 70%.
I couldn't agree with you more on all those points, except I'm going to add one thing. Trump needs to move with all due haste against social media, because they can drag this out. They can influence the election results because of all the delays they can cause to happen. I think he has to use his executive powers and even executive orders. And I think that he needs to act swiftly. I mean, like next week, swiftly. We're already in the campaign. He cannot lose the 50% of this country that's dumber than a box of rocks by choice, that'll make up their mind a few weeks before the election on who they're voting for.
Yeah, he's got to engage full psychological warfare and designate his targets. His targets are the media, the mainstream media. His targets are the deep state intelligence traitors and moles in the FBI, Department of Justice, CIA, State Department, DIA, the Pentagon. So he has to go after them, go after the media, and he also has to go after the foreign countries, in Britain, for example, that were undermining the president. He doesn't necessarily have to make them, the victims of the guillotine, politically speaking, but he certainly can go in and say, this whole thing, you've burned your bridges of trust, and now you have to rebuild them. So we're not going into war. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. And he needs to build new bridges directly to Russia, because that is the best hope for balancing and getting entry into Iran and having a political victory with Iran and North Korea. Russia could be very instrumental in that. Putin has said before, China is the danger. So Putin,
they are.
knows China is the danger to Christianity in the world, because he knows what they are in their heart, and he knows they're robots. They're two-dimensional. They do Falun Gong, organ sacrifice, just like they're cutting up a chicken. These people are inhuman. They do not have the Christian moral character. They may have other virtues and assets, but the Communist Party is the danger to America. And Trump also needs to cultivate weeds growing in China. So he needs to encourage Falun Gong, the Shen Yun, Taiwan, Vietnam,
and Hong Kong resurgence of freedom. We are out of time, but I wanted to give you a brief time here to tell people how to follow your good work and tell people how to get a copy of your latest book.
Just go to shellgamewhistleblower.com, and Shellgame, you can click on the book, and my email and contacts up there. And it's always an honor to be with you, Dave.
Scott, I'm going to tell you, you're going to set the world on fire with this interview. This is going to go viral. I can tell you right now. I think it's some of the best work that you have done. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing this with my audience here on the Common Sense Show.
My pleasure, brother. God bless you. God bless your audience.
Take care. Thank you. Take care.